start with, as Dennis talked about this ideation, Terry talked about the data. I think a lot of the times when you come to concept homes, they become just a concept. But this is an effort where we were able to actually put the D in R&D. It's something we're very proud of, to go through this whole process and really have something tangible that someone will actually live in. So this is an amazing thing. And as Dennis mentioned, with the ideation process, it was really taking the time to understand who's going to live in these homes and how will they live. So with that, in the process, it's holding each other accountable as we make decisions in design. It's designing to the design principles for this home, for this buyer, or in this case, this renter. So with this renter, this is actually the trailblazer millennial demographic. They're 25 to 34 years of age. They're actually the highest average earning income of all the millennial demographics. And 41% of them are couples with kids, and 29% of them are couples without kids. And what's interesting about this demographic, though, is 33% of them prefer to rent. I think they're just starting their families. They're not maybe ready to settle down. So this is still a transition for them until maybe their kids get to an age where they're ready to go to school. So they're going to find that right area to move to. So on the next slide, you're going to see an actual picture of the ADU on the first floor being built. And the ideation and construction, the collaboration didn't stop when it was pencils down in the design. Eric and the Dolan team and the whole team, actually, with weekly calls, we really made sure that as the homes were being built, we still collaborated to make sure our design principles were in place. And as Terry mentioned, with the wellness aspect being so important to this demographic and this renter, as we started to get into some of the designs that we came up with in the initial sketches and collaboration, we found as we started getting into costing, as typically happens in a project, you need to start value engineering. So how do we remove windows while not sacrificing the amount of natural light that's so important to the spiritual and emotional wellness inside of home? As we start to get into constructability, making sure we have proper shear so we're not adding cost that would raise the rents of these homes, as Dennis mentioned, the attainability. So it's really that process continued all the way through, and it was just something that was a collaboration all the way to till these homes are actually now built and out in the yard at the factory. So on the next slide, you're going to see the floor plans themselves. As we talked about attainability too, one of the thoughts on this as we started to design these homes is the site would have allowed us to do a 65-foot deep module. But what we learned from the factory was that if you went to 64 feet, it allowed them to build all 3 modules on the line at one time. And by reducing that 1 foot, it built efficiency in the yard, in the factory, while not sacrificing any of the livability or aesthetic of the home. So that was a very important thing to learn in the process and the collaboration on this. Also with this, the reason that I think it was a great solution, what we did, is Dennis mentioned that missing middle, that ADU downstairs. If we were to just volumize this and make this a one whole unit with a square footage, probably too large, that makes the rent unattainable for the demographic in this area. So the ADU is a great way to add another option, another unit, and then the main unit upstairs. So the ADU is a 660 square foot unit on the first floor. It enters off the front of the street, and I'll go into that a little bit in a minute. But the main unit enters off the rear with a private alley, and it sits above that with the 2 floors with a 2007 square foot townhome. So on the next slide, you're going to see one of the design principles we came up with, and 94% of this demographic say the first impression and safety is key. So where these homes entered, how they entered was very important. The ADU, the reason we put that on the front is it got enough room to have an actual yard with the picket fence, which was where the name was derived from. We had a traditional picket fence on this small little home. You get a private yard and a great front porch before you enter the home. So that creates some separation from the actual street to the home, adding a sense of safety for the occupants of this home. The reason we put the main entry of the upper unit and the bigger unit on the back of the home was this home actually has an alley back there. You're still going to get that room for their own little yard with the picket fence, but they have room for a private parking space. So with the bigger home, we felt it was a little more valuable to allow them to have a private parking space as well. And what this also did was create a true vestibule. So when your guests do arrive, you can greet them there. You can take their coats, and you really have a sense of safety before you bring them upstairs into the rest of the home. So as you go upstairs, you're going to see on the next slide, the family room. 67% of this demographic say this is a place to gather. This is where you entertain with your friends. This is where you socialize. So this is a space where the location is very important, and how it lives in the home is very important. And the next slide, you're going to see the design principle we came up with that is that the family room is the heart of the home. So its location is very key. The indoor-outdoor livability for that wellness aspect, the amount of natural light that comes in there, the adjacency to the kitchen, as they're entertaining and gathering with friends, this is really important. Another key factor that you'll know about this is the location of both the family rooms and where the private outdoor space is for these homes. And this really has to do with the holistic approach to wellness for community. With the ADU having the front yard and the front porch on the street, the main unit above also has a private deck that can look down on the street. Now you have more eyes on the street. That adds for safer communities. So now it's a holistic approach to wellness for community and not just for home. So on the next slide, you're going to see the adjacency. The other design principle is the hub of the home. The hub of the home is the kitchen. The kitchen is for more than just cooking. The kitchen now is a place to entertain. This is the place where you're going to have appetizers, but it's also functional to cook. So we wanted to make sure that it was right sized. We really paid attention to how the storage works in these homes. We really made the effort to have no dead corners. And as you can see on the main unit in the middle of the screen, the island is right sized because this is also the place you're going to dine. The image on the right shows how that island can flex. You can expand it for when it is time to eat dinner. There's plenty of room. We actually had the pantry on the left of that island step back to the depth of the upper cabinet, so you have more floor space. It's comfortable to sit there, still have room for someone to walk by behind you. Same thing the other side, the way the cabinets and then extra storage. We got plenty of storage in this kitchen, how that stepped back to allow for more floor space and functionality. But that really part of that island became a great spot to be that true hub that links you from the kitchen to the family room and then even the views out to the private deck. On the ADU, we also did that kitchen where you have the room for some stools because this is maybe the smaller couple, the two of them eating, and it might flow into the family room for that connection. So on the next slide, and as Terry mentioned with the data she showed on the most important rooms in the home, we already touched on the family room, but the primary bedroom is another one that is very important to this demographic. 43% of them feel this is a space for more than just sleeping. They're probably not far removed from times when they had roommates. They probably spent a lot of time in that primary bedroom when they had roommates. So they're very comfortable spending time in this space. It's sleeping, it's relaxing, it's watching Instagram videos, it's probably even working or exercising. So on the next slide, you're going to see how we incorporated our design principles to that, which this is their precious personal space. So with the main unit upstairs, we really focused on what that meant, being more than just a bedroom. So as you can see on the bottom of that upper floor, we enhanced that space and added a lounge. This has room for us, a love seat. You could probably put a Peloton in there, a desk for working. This is that space where they're going to spend time, unwind personally before they go back down to the heart of home. And the heart of the home is where they're going to socialize with the rest of their family or their guests. We were actually able even to accomplish this in the ADU, being such a small footprint and a small unit. In the lower right that you're going to see is we had this space where you could put a desk so someone could work from home. You could have a space for a little love seat or a couch. You could put a Peloton there. So it still gives them, even on this smaller 660 square feet unit, a place for their precious personal space. And then on the next slide, you're going to see the flex space. The flex space is 33% of this demographic say home is a place to work. And as we've talked about, the high percentage that this is couples with kids or no kids, that probably means two people working from home. So the flex space needed to be a space that is thought about more than just as a bedroom. And on the next slide, you're going to see our design principle that was square footage where it counts. Typically, when we design homes, we really think of bed bath count. And as Terry mentioned earlier on, that we really focused on space count. Once you define it as bedroom, that's 10 foot by 10 foot minimum with a strip closet. So think of that size of space that is allocated for a function of just bedroom, that you could tell them that it's optional for something else. But as we mentioned with the size of family for this demographic, what's needed, it doesn't need to be 10 by 10. This can be the space that gets downsized. It's a space where they could work. Since the lounge in the primary bedroom has that other desk space, the couple has two places to work from home. It could be a place to just relax. As you see in the image, it could be a small library. This could be a place to exercise. Or as their family's growing, maybe this becomes the space that the upper bedroom is where their younger child or their first child lives, and the flex could even become a nursery as their family starts to grow. So square footage where it counts was really key on this home, and the last design principle I'm going to cover. And we'll turn it back over to Dennis and Nicole to talk about sustainability.
Yeah, right on. Thanks, Ryan. Great walkthrough. So I just to kind of kick things off, I want to reconnect our sustainability and resilience goals back to the whole theme around constructability. And the first of these goals comes back to, when we talk about high performance home, this is really tying back to a lot of the data that Terry shared at the beginning of this conversation around the livability element. And it's really how do we focus on the indoor air quality desires, the clean water, and think about comfort overall as a consumer and those living inside this home and how they enjoy their space and create peace of mind, even in the face of a major climate event, for example. The next goal, focusing on construction or waste generation, really starts to tie into how we as an industry can look at and achieve some of the goals that are being laid out, which Nicole's going to share with us what's happening on a national scale. But really, how does shifting things from offsite or on-site to offsite impact the waste that we generate through the build of a typical residential home? And then if we think about, we want to be people friendly, we want to be planet friendly, how does this all tie back into the footprint we leave on the planet as we create more built environment? So really taking a look at an ambitious goal around carbon reduction as it relates to embodied carbon and operational carbon. And for today's conversation, we're going to really dig into the reduction in carbon emissions. If you can hit to the next slide, please. So when we talk about the reduction in carbon emissions, this is something that we certainly could not take on our own. So we're very excited to have a fantastic team working with us. We have Nicole Granith from Tangible, who'll be explaining to you how we're approaching this process holistically. But we also have a great resource in our friends at Cal Poly with Miriam Kuhi-Rostami. I think I got it right, Miriam. Hopefully that worked. But Miriam's been a great resource to us in understanding the implications on embodied carbon within the build methodology itself. So she's really helped us to create a framework and break that down. And why that's important is if you kind of look at the entire life cycle of the built environment here on this diagram, it's important to understand where we're focusing on for the purposes of our study today. So we're going to look at the embodied carbon that goes into the manufacturing of a product, the logistics of that product, and then ultimately how the home is built for the direct emissions piece. So if you think about this, then we're going to add on the operational emissions component to it, which is helping us understand not only what are we putting into the house, how are we putting the house together, but then also how is the house being operated and what impacts does that have on the long-term impact on the environment. So with that, and glad to have Nicole here to dig into this deeper with us. But Nicole will be able to share with you how Tangible is supporting this and creating transparency around what we're doing from a carbon characterization perspective.
Thanks so much, Dennis. Excited to share with you all the work that Dennis so kindly teed up there. I think a lot of what we've been honored to be involved in this project stems from is the spirit of collaboration that each of the members of the coalition have come to the project with. And so we're excited to contribute our part to that. So for our part, thank you, Betsy, our goal as a company is really to turn buildings into a solution to the climate crisis. There's a lot going on right now that is making the impacts of the changing climate very real and easy for us all to understand the direct effects on our life. And so one area that I know, obviously, as Terry was talking about, we are having some additional reconsiderations as maybe a broader society around what types of purchasing decisions we're making, what types of spaces we want to occupy, and ultimately how we are going to have those reflect the world that we want to build. So next, the problem that we need to address in order to get there is thinking about how exactly we are going to alter the materials that we're building with. And as Dennis mentioned, a lot of the impact of constructing a house comes up front from the materials that are selected. Globally, these building materials are responsible for 11% of all emissions. And then within any given house, the emissions to create those building materials tend to be equivalent to about 10 years of actually operating that property. So you have a really big moment here to make a decision around what types of materials we want to use in the project. And I think the Picket Fence house is a perfect example of where an opportunity exists. Yes, thank you. So because this is such a massive impact, and you have areas of our lives that maybe feel a little bit more tangible, like the fashion industry and flights, but are with building materials, it's a little bit more difficult to get our hands around. I think bringing it back to the ways that the Dahlem team has talked about all of the different demographics that are going to be the reasons that demographic is going to be interested in the picket fence. The goal here is to make it evident that the actual power lies in our hands, and to that end, we are working with the team to make it incredibly transparent about what decisions were made about the building materials there. Next slide. Thank you. And then additionally, we are seeing that a lot of this is happening against the backdrop of increasing legislation. So right now, obviously, the picket fence, located in Pennsylvania, is an example for the rest of the country, for the rest of North America, on what exactly can happen as we are scaling this across the North American market and taking a look at folks who are occupying all sorts of different markets across the country, across in Canada, and the ways that they can make sure that they are ahead of time compliant with upcoming legislation. So again, goal here is to be incredibly transparent about where these material selections will have the biggest impact. And so that's where Tangible comes in. We are measuring the embodied carbon of the Picket Fence concept home and are excited to show you exactly how we are going about that. Thank you. So a few quick key things to chat about here. The first is that what we are doing is taking an overview of the bill of materials that are being used in the picket fence construction. Then our team is matching the environmental product declarations, or the declarations that tell you what the carbon footprint of any given material is, to those specific materials that are being used in picket fence. And our founding researcher, Emily Flynn, is leading the charge on this and really making sure that we have the most accurate angles of all of the EPDs that are going to represent those products. And then that as we are going through and confirming those emissions factors in the units, that we are also working in close collaboration with Dr. Miriam Kohistami on what blank spaces exist and where there are areas that she has been able to create new environmental product declarations. So lastly, the piece of where we're focusing the effort on doing this measurement is very much looking at the material selection standpoint. So the goal of this analysis is to highlight the embodied carbon hotspots. And this embodied carbon, or the carbon that is emitted to produce these building materials, is one of the core areas that we upfront in designing the picket fence concept home have to massively impact the environmental impact of the home itself. And as a lot of these projects, thank you, are continuing to go out, the beauty of what the analysis that we're doing right now is that these findings can then be applied to any of the future concept homes or to any of the additional iterations to the 412 that is coming up. And so there are a lot of learnings to be had from studying what types of building materials are in the project right now, how we can transparently declare that, and then how that can help inform future decisions as well. So the last piece around this is really that there is a scalable way to see the embodied carbon of the picket fence concept home. And this is something that, again, we're incredibly honored that the team brought us in to partner with all of you, because it's a very important factor that, if not considered early, can be difficult to change. But because we're able to take a look now, give this transparent overview of the impacts, there's a lot of opportunities for where down the line in the future some of those adjustments and alternative products can be made.
Oh,
Betsy, you are
muted.
muted.
I did that to myself. I'm going to pull everybody back in. And know if we have any questions so far. That was a great overview. I know there were a lot of people who were at the summit in Denver earlier this year who wanted to hear more about kind of the progress of where we were with the project and how everything's been going so far. So I think, even talking to you guys over the last couple of days, it's really cool that there are two homes because you're learning things here and you can even have almost an immediate impact in, as Nicole was alluding to, in trying new things in that second home as well. I'm hearing a little click if anybody's, I don't know where that's coming from. At any rate,
I think it might be you, Betsy. I'm not sure.
I don't think so.
It's all good now.
So somebody's enjoying the show with some popcorn, huh?
Yeah.
I know, that's right. Live TV, guys.
Oh,
so there were a couple of things that you shared offline with us, where some of the data came from Mindbase. So I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit. We have two things. One is kind of the bigger scope that I'm going to share here, and then we have the two consumer groups that you could talk about a little bit more. So can you give us a little bit more of the background on how Mindspace was used as a tool in the
that's great.
design process?
I can take that one, Betsy. Thanks for the question. So Kantar Consulting is one of the leading consumer insights firms in the nation, and we've been partnering with them now on wave 2 and 3 of our study. And what that allows us to do is to basically take all of the responses to the study. So in wave 2 was 4,000, wave 3 was 3,000. And then Kantar does what's called an append, and they append the responses with their customer segmentation tool, which is Mindbase. And Mindbase is unlike other tools that many of you may have used before, like Claritas or Valves, which uses a like follows like methodology. So in other words, if Dennis and Terry live on the same street and they're next door neighbors, those methodologies would say that Dennis and Terry are the same person, which clearly is not the case. What Mindbase does is uses 45,000 different data points to identify each one of us individually into one of these consumer segments that are based on behaviors, values, and attitudes. And so that really gets to a finer grain level of detail. And in the case of the millennials, as Ryan said, we selected the Trailblazer segment as that particular target audience for the Picket Fence. So it allowed our team to look much more deeply behind the Trailblazers' motivations, their attitudes about personal versus private space, their risk aversion, their willingness to invest money in different ways. So lots of different sort of depth of analyses. And then for the 412 home, which, as Dennis said, is the for sale home that's next up in this team's repository of insights, if you will, and creativity, the full throttles is one of the boomer segments. That will be our target buyer group that we will then really dive into again in more detail to understand their needs and wants, and then to create design principles that Ryan and the Dolan team can bring to life through plan design. So Betsy, the real reason we engaged with Mindbase was, as Ryan said, to understand who will live here specifically, not just generally, and then how do they want to live, so we can create better solutions for how these people want to live.
And Terry, what they're willing to choose in home too.
That's right, exactly. What the trade-offs are.
So everybody online didn't have the benefit of seeing everything zoomed in as I was looking through things as we were getting ready for today. But we do have a PDF that before the end of the call today, Natalie's going to share a link to that so you guys can access it online. But I'd encourage you to do that because you can zoom in a lot of the additional detail in the research, in the design, and then certainly we're going to be touching on the constructability of the home as well, and how everything comes together there. I also had a chance to talk to Nicole a couple of days ago. I'm working with Green Builder Media and about 70 other companies to do guidelines for ESG in the housing space. Since the guidelines we've been using to date are really chemical industry driven, which isn't really the same thing as what we need as an industry. So we've been working on that, and carbon is certainly a new area for calculating, and there are some hurdles to overcome. And we had a great conversation about the fact that you're not just going to be a calculator tool, but Tangible is also going to offer a little bit of the guidance on how to think about it. So kind of the strategic process in using an online tool to do that. So I think that would be really helpful. So glad to hear you guys are focused on that effort.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I think that's why we were so excited to be pulled into the Picket Fence concept home, because there are a lot of opportunities to talk with folks and say, hey, this doesn't have to be that onerous of a process, and it doesn't have to be something that just exists in a black box. If we know what materials are going in, then we can take a look at what the impacts are, and then we can start to show where some of those potential swaps can actually have the biggest potential effect.